There are about a skrillion different reasons that you might be feeling stuck in your role as a stepmom. And let's be real, often the factors that contribute to that feeling of stagnancy or stuckness are largely outside your control. So maybe there is a high degree of tension in the co-parenting relationship between your partner and the other household. Maybe you are knee deep in an ongoing court case or legal battle of some kind. Maybe you're dealing with just one of the many headaches and heartaches that life throws at us. And that's affecting your family and causing you to just feel like you're in a bit of a rut. But what I want to say as clearly as I can is that just because a lot of the contributing factors to that feeling of stuckness are outside your control, that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. And in fact, in my experience working with stepmoms and in my own personal experience as a stepmom for over a decade, I've found that oftentimes it's the simplest choices we can make that help us kind of interrupt the stuck pattern and shift in a more productive direction. And you have to take that first step, right? If you're going to be solving some of the bigger issues in your stepfamily world. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to share with you 3 simple strategies that you can use to help yourself get unstuck. And to make it super clear for us, I want to anchor it in terms of past, present, and future. So let's dive in. First, if you're feeling stuck, it can be helpful to reflect on the past. Who were you before you were in this role as a stepmom? What did you care about? How did you spend your time? If we were to go back and look at your calendar, what would be reflected there? And how does that compare to what is on your schedule these days, how you're spending your time now in this role? And the reason I ask this is that it can feel sometimes like we have a little bit of selective amnesia for what life was like before we became a stepmom, especially when we're really in the thick of it. It can almost feel like hard to imagine what life was like back then. But the truth is, you weren't just suspended in midair waiting to drop into your stepfamily's narrative. You were living a rich and active life. You had interests, you had demands on your time, you had relationships and connections that really filled you up. That's part of what contributed to making you such a fascinating, appealing partner for your partner, right? When you first met. But here's the thing, sometimes in the process of getting acclimated to stepfamily life, we systematically drop a lot of the activities, interests, and supports that made us who we were when we became a stepmom. So I'll give you an example from my own life. I, for years and years, attended it was a Monday night yoga class. It wasn't a fancy yoga class. It was just at my local community center. But for like $5, I could go in there and just switch off my brain, come back into my body. I wasn't good at yoga. I mean, I was a total beginner, but it was such an important anchor in my week. And it really helped me feel like I was synthesizing all the noise that was in my head and then just moving into the start of a new week in a calmer, better version of myself, more grounded. And at some point, I don't know exactly when, after moving in with my partner and his kids, just stopped going. I stopped going for a while. And I think when it finally became clear to me that I'd done that, and I was talking to my partner about it, he was saying, "Why'd you stop going? Like, you love that class." And I said something like, "Well, the kids are with us on Monday nights. I'm needed here." When really I wasn't needed. I wasn't needed for that hour of time. It was just a story I'd told myself. And in telling myself that story and believing it, I let go of something that really was propping me up in ways I didn't even fully realize. And so with my partner's encouragement, I went back to that class, picked it back up again, and felt immediate relief, not just because of all the good things it does for me in the moment, not just because it helped me reconnect to some of that calm I was missing out on, but it was a connection back to a past version of myself, to something I sought out and put into practice before I even became a stepmom. That's powerful. So my challenge to you is to reflect on what is missing from my life now that I enjoyed before I became a stepmom? And how can I bring some of that back into my life now? It might be as simple as, reaching out to, maybe you had a standing phone date with a friend and that's fallen by the wayside. That can happen for all of us, not just stepmoms, but it's an easy thing to bring back into your life. So as you're watching this, I'd love it if you'd comment below, like, what is one thing from your past life that you can borrow from the past and bring back into your day-to-day now, and see how you feel. So that's number one, reflect on the past. The second strategy is to be in the present. And I know that gets overused to the point that it's kind of become meaningless, but this is my question to you. When is the last time you really paused? Like really paused to zoom back into your body and check in about your in the moment needs. We know that self-care is foundational to our success as stepmoms. We know this. And yet self-care is not a one size fits all endeavor. It evolves over time and it varies dramatically stepmom to stepmom. And so a first crucial step is checking in with yourself and in as non-judgmental a way as you can. Be honest about what you're needing. Speaking of your past self, are you missing the time where you just had free, open-ended time to roll solo to an activity or two, or just have some peace and quiet to read your book or watch your show or whatever it is that you're missing out on? How can you bring some of that back into your life? And oftentimes what we do is we do a lot of shoulding with the self-care. So, oh, well, I really should be signing up for a volunteer project. Well, maybe that's something that really would be supportive and that you are needing in this moment. But what kind of project are you going to pick? If you are feeling like you are craving alone time, maybe don't pair that with a big group activity where you're having to be on and social. Because if you're already noticing that you're craving some just solitude and quiet, you can find an activity that will pair with that. Same idea. You might not necessarily want to make plans to do brunch with your girlfriends if you're feeling a little talked out, or you feel like you've just been giving and giving and giving and you need to kind of recharge yourself. Similarly, if you're feeling isolated, this comes up so much for stepmoms. We talked about it in our last live Q&A here about just the isolation that in particular childless and child-free stepmoms experience, but we all experience it. It can be this deep sense of loneliness that strangely is a reality for us even when we're surrounded by people. Sometimes it's when we're immediately surrounded by all the people. You can still feel like an outsider. That's a normal part of the stepmom experience, but it's also something that's worth attending to. There are choices you can make to help interrupt, because it can produce that stuck feeling. I feel alone in this experience. I feel like no one understands me. And so I don't know what to do with that. I'm stuck here. Well, you're not. You get to choose how you're going to meet that need. And so maybe it's about connecting with someone who has known you since the beginning, or maybe it's about reaching out and tapping into a supportive stepmom community. Social media is a great place to start that, but you might also enjoy being part of a more private community where you can deepen conversations off of social media. I've shared the one that I recommend in the description box below. And as always check the description box, because anything I might mention, as well as my best resources that I talk about the most, you'll find them all there. So reflect on the past, be in the present, and finally, you know where this is going, plan for the future. Sometimes when a stepmom feels stuck, and I hear this all the time from the stepmoms that I work with, it's because they're staring down the barrel of something that just feels really intimidating and overwhelming. Maybe it is a looming court case. Maybe it is a hard conversation. Maybe it's as simple as you're getting to the point of the week where you're coming up on transition day and you know that the household becomes really tense or chaotic, or there's a lot of conflict when that happens, and that kicks up unrest for you. Maybe it's as simple as you don't know when it's going to happen. You're just anticipating the next interaction with your stepkid's mom. And for whatever reason, that produces anxiety and worry for you. When you have those feelings about the future, it can truly be paralyzing, where there's not an immediate course for you to take. And so you stay kind of frozen in time. But again, that doesn't mean there's nothing that you can do. And so I'm a big advocate of good enough planning for the future. So we don't want to go overboard. You don't want to try and think about every possible situation that might come up and run yourself ragged, over functioning, trying to anticipate every possible contingency. But you also don't want to stay stuck, right? This is our whole point. And so a really helpful practice is to sit down, set a timer for like 5, maybe 10 minutes. That's it. That should be all that it takes. And just brain dump every worried thought that is on your mind onto that paper. Just get it all in one place. And importantly, as you're doing that, you're just it's like you're free dumping it onto the page. You're not trying to come up with a plan. You're not trying to fix any of these problems. You're not judging yourself for having these worries. You're just in as dispassionate a way as possible, in as neutral a way as possible. You're just getting it all on the page. Then you sit back, you read it as though you're an outsider just coming in and in a business-like way, reading through these worried thoughts. And you are circling or underlying the ones that really jump out at you. Like, what is living rent-free in my brain and robbing me of sleep and peace and making me feel stuck? Then once you have one, maybe two of those, start with one. Start with whichever one is the scariest as you read it. And then make a plan. Decide, like, okay, what is a brief plan? Like, what is one next step I can take to address this worry? So let's say you're losing sleep over estate planning. You have big questions about long-term, what's going to happen with finances and the legality of your assets that you have individually and together. And this is really causing you a lot of stress. Schedule a time to talk frankly with your partner. Maybe enlist the help of a professional who can facilitate the process of hammering this all out. But the point is, once you've made that decision, okay, tomorrow when we're uninterrupted, I'm going to talk to my partner, or I'm going to do a little bit of research on some people we can maybe hire to help us with this. Those are 2 steps that I can take. Great. Once you've decided that worry is set aside. And if the worry pops back in, you just remind yourself, I've got a plan and it's good enough. Another example is, again, sometimes there's a more open-ended worry about some kind of nosy question from someone. It might be from the other household. It could be from just an acquaintance or someone at, a school drop-off maybe. And you're worried about how you're going to field those questions. Again, back to good enough planning, you can tell yourself, all right, I'm going to come up with a few really simple scripted responses I can give if someone asks a question that I don't feel comfortable answering in the moment. Or maybe I'm going to practice the timeless art of changing the subject. My stepkids do it all the time. Why can't I? And again, once you've decided that, you remind yourself, okay, now I have a good enough plan and I'm setting it aside. So I hope this helps you see that sometimes when we feel stuck, it's almost like we're suspended in space and we're not anchored in time at all. And so by choosing either to reflect on the past, stay grounded in the present, and plan judiciously for the future, it can shake things up just enough to create a little bit of movement, and you can move in a more productive direction as a stepmom. So I hope this is helpful. If you're tuning into the replay, I'd love to hear from you. Please drop a comment and let us know what stood out from this list to you, which area is most challenging for you, and which of the ideas that we chatted about here seem like ones you could reasonably try out. I'd love to know. And as always, I want to invite you to check out the resources listed in this description box so you can start plugging in to support right away. As always, drop your questions. I'll get back to them as soon as I can. And thanks, everyone. I'll see you here next Wednesday for another live Q&A.